Welcome back to War Thunder Mythbusters. Today I got for you quite a few more missile tests, some amphibious tank tests, and a few others. So be sure to hit that subscribe button. Let's first get into these missile tests. So I got a lot of comments in my last video about how you could lock onto ATGMs and other air-to-air missiles. So that was the first test to come up, and the way we decided to do it, I was in a helicopter, a dude was in another helicopter, and he fired a tow missile, and I was indeed able to lock onto the tow missile. However, it did not seem to actually impact or detonate the tow missile, and just flew off to the side eventually when the tow missile exploded. There were a few comments of people asking if you could impact a missile with another missile, some claiming that they had in fact done it. They were using swarms at the moment, which are a close range missile, so it's possible that the explosion fuse just went off by the time the missiles met up near each other. Because the missile that I fired, the Igla, goes much faster than the tow missiles on the other guy's helicopter. And that factor, there are a few other situations I'd like to test, like would if you directly impact the other missile, will it go off? That rumor, if a missile can hit another missile, I'll still say is open for discussion. However, the one where you can lock on the tow missiles, that one's true for sure. There's also some comments saying that you can indeed throw off a air-to-air missile with a ATGM, and that indeed was something that I wanted to test out, but I didn't have the right vehicles to do it. Now I do have the vehicles, and the results we got from the test is that if you are firing the tow missile in any other direction, it will not throw off the air-to-air missile. However, if you fire it directly back at the air-to-air missile, or whoever fired the air-to-air missile, you will mess up the lock and throw off the air-to-air missile. The last test I did about missiles was on whether a engine off or on will throw off a air-to-air missile. The first one we did, it was actually the second, was whether just turning your engine off is gonna make you lose lock. And I can say, no, it will not. Which makes sense, because despite your engine being off, you're still the hottest thing in the sky. Unless perhaps you're facing the sun. Then you might actually have a chance. Perhaps I should test that next. But to test it further, I had somebody on their jet and turn the engine off, and even have the engine cool down for a while, and see if I could lock onto them with air-to-air missiles. And it still was indeed able to lock onto the enemy jet. It was also able to lock onto a helicopter with its engine off that had been cooled down to 19 degrees Celsius. Now there are two factors that we thought of that are possibly affecting our tests. That is that the missiles we are using, well the ones I was using, were very modern. And it's entirely possible that Gaijin coded these more modern missiles to target vehicles much better. The other possible factor is because we are testing this on Alaska, which is commonly considered a very cold place. A cooled jet engine is still the warmest thing around, and so the missile still is able to lock onto that. And this goes into another test that I did of someone asking whether the map location, whether it be a desert or a snowy place, affects the engine temperatures. My initial assumption would be, yeah, of course it does. If it's like 100 degrees out, your plane's going to be 100 degrees hotter than if it was not 100 degrees out. However, I was very surprised about the results I got from these tests. I did 3 takeoffs on 3 different maps: Column Goal, a desert map, and a snow map, which I forgot the names of. On Column Goal, it took 1 minute and 12 seconds for my oil temperature to turn yellow. At the 2 minute and 1 second mark, my oil temperature was 185 and my engine temperature was 483. In comparison, on the desert map, it took me 1 minute, 14 seconds, and 33 seconds for my oil temperature to turn yellow. And at the 2 minute and 1 second mark, my oil temperature was at 185 and my engine temperature was at 482. And on the snow map, for my oil temperature to turn yellow, it took 1 minute, 14 seconds, and 23 milliseconds. And at the 2 minute and 1 second mark there, my oil temperature was at 185, my engine temperature was at 483. Further on that, for all the maps, it took around the same time for the engine to begin overheating, where it's a hard red. Although with Column Goal, I actually had stopped climbing a few seconds before my engine would have turned red. But the result was easily assumably the same. It was a few seconds off, most likely would have started overheating in those few seconds. And of course, the stern temperatures on all the maps was the same. This is very surprising to me, as I have always assumed that because the different maps have different temperatures, they would affect your plane differently. In fact, I've heard many people say that. So honestly, I'm going to say that this needs more testing before I say anything's final about it. Perhaps it's an issue with the custom bell I had set up. Maybe the plane I had chosen, the J7W1, just works well in all weather. But if it is have to do with the custom battle, I can solemnly say that the locking on to a jet with engines off was not caused by Alaska being a cold map, if it is a cold map. As in those tests, I had the same settings I had in these tests. I'd like to further test the air-to-air missiles locking onto off engines test. I wanted to try to have a jet with its not so modern air-to-air missiles lock onto a helicopter or jet with its engine off, parked and cooled, but unfortunately my assistant had issues not ramming into me. One person had asked if a floating tank could carry other tanks on its back and float around. With my experiences of trying to put vehicles on other vehicles in War Thunder, my assumption was that it wasn't going to work, but would be fun to test anyways. We first tried Italian tanks on a PT-76, and well, that didn't work. The lightest tank I could think of, the L333, did not last very long in the back of the PT-76. Similar story for the R3. And the Fiat 6614 kind of took place of the PT-76, and then the game tried to justify why the kill went to him of all people with a kill cam. For the Russian tanks on the Italian ones, well, it was a similar story. All the milk trucks and the ASU-57 simply slipped off the armored car. As a last-ditch effort to try to get these tanks to carry one another, we tried to get the first milk truck onto the BMP-1 and the Object 906. And at first it seemed like getting on the back of the BMP-1 was going to work, but it quickly fell to disaster. And a similar story followed suit with the Object 906. These results don't surprise me at all, as collision between vehicles in games has always been really weird. And upon that, I don't think any of these vehicles are able to carry 3 extra tons. I wonder if the bizarre collision is one of the reasons why they don't want to add aircraft carriers to Navy. If that's so, I really hope that they find a way to resolve that issue, as aircraft carriers would be very cool, especially in enduring confrontation. The person who asked me to test the floating mechanics also asked me to test the mouse in water, and well, it does what just about every other tank does. It can go to about where the exhaust ports on the engine are, and no, that is not tall enough to go through the canal in Eastern Europe. Based on what they saw in the stream, someone had assumed that perhaps the armor-piercing RP3s do not actually penetrate the amount that they said they do penetrate. So to test this would be pretty simple. Just get a plane that has armor-piercing RP3s and a tank that has similar amount of armor to what the armor-piercing RP3s can penetrate. That being at 10 meters, 100 millimeters of armor. Luckily for all of us, the IS-2 and IS-1 have 100 millimeters of side armor. So once you just line up the IS-2 with the RP3s and penetrate the right area, and it went right through. Now perhaps at different ranges, those penetration rates are incorrect. However, I'm gonna say that they're probably correct. Another test of something that you would expect to happen, and indeed does happen, is if you bomb torpedoes, will the torpedo be destroyed? And this was very simple to test. Launch some torpedoes, have someone else bomb them, see what happens. They do indeed get destroyed if you bomb them. Although apparently the explosion underwater isn't that big. It seemed only the torpedoes that were in the explosion animation's radius were actually harmed. And for the final myth was actually the most upvoted comment of that YouTube video. If you crash your plane going Mach 1.2, does the pilot actually die instead of going unconscious? While I'm pretty sure this was intended as a joke, I'm going to test it anyways. Although I don't actually have any of the top tier jets, so getting to Mach 1.2 would be kind of hard. Thankfully, my lovely assistant did indeed have the F4, so he put it to the test and rammed me directly, killing me, though it seemed that the pilot had been either erased or completely eviscerated. Regardless, he was not unconscious, at the least. Now that's just all the myths I have for you that I tested today. There's still quite a few other ones that I want to test that people asked about on the comments of that last video, but the comments of this video are still open for other myth suggestions, so hold no expense. Before I close this out, first I want to thank quite a few people who actually actually help me make these videos: Apollo, Pilots, Air, Perk You Up, One Max, as well as all my YouTube members. And I'd actually like to also give a shout out to the War Thunder YouTuber NorthGG, who has been making War Thunder Mythbusters episodes for quite some time now. I don't want people thinking I'm stealing his idea or anything, so be sure to go check his channel out. His videos are pretty interesting. Other than that, I'd thank you for watching. If you have any comments, concerns, or questions, you can hit me up down below or on my Discord. I want to make these War Thunder Mythbusters episodes every Wednesday, and upon that, make War Thunder Weekly news videos every Sunday. I make random videos throughout the week, and I like to stream on Saturdays, so be sure to hit that bell icon. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Hey, don't leave just yet. I got a bonus myth for you. In the spirit of the last video, you can indeed lock on to the moon. Though if you shoot that down, I'm not really sure what will happen.